Well, let's chat about all things that are going on, and hopefully we got some viewers out there. I was on the wrong station, unfortunately, so I was talking to nobody, which was pathetic. But there you go, back again, and see if we've got any viewers out there that would like to join us and have something to say. I remember this is Winning Ways Show. We're going to be chatting to all and sundry. There are a couple of things that I really wanted to start off with, and the one was the Remington Park in America jackpot that wasn't paid out. The guy, Duncan, someone or other, had exactly the only ticket, but there was a dead heat in the jackpot, and as a result, Remington Park decided they're not going to pay him out, which to me is incongruous. There was no one else that won it, and he should have been paid out. Well, Patrick Cummins from the Thoroughbred Ideas Foundation, which is a foundation that looks after racing people in America, has taken up the cudgels. He's got Maggie Moss, who's a big racehorse owner and a very, very influential lawyer in America, to run it for her. For him and on behalf of Duncan, and they're going to have a go for an industry would not want to pay out a punter that wins. But let's move on from that and chat a little bit about Mike de Kock. Put up a post on his website, and I actually got it here, and it's very, very interesting. It was it's probably the best article I've ever read about where we are in racing and how we should be funding racing. It says racing's funding models need a rethink. Everyone in racing longs for the return of normalcy at its earliest, safest possible time possible, writes Patrick Cummins, the US Thoroughbred Ideas Foundation, a thought-provoking piece that has a definite bearing on the funding models of most racing jurisdictions at the critical juncture for all. In the interim, we think it's a good time to reflect on America's racing business model for the future of the sport. And it goes on to say, there's not an exercise in name calling or corporate shaming. We are quite certain some will misinterpret as such. We believe this is a clear-headed assessment of the financial realities of our business. Horse owners and horse players choose to participate. If we are to create a legitimately sustainable future that ensures proper funding to enable continued participation, then it is a time for a new model. Well, I can't believe that would be any more apt than in the situation that South Africa is in right now, because the implosion's coming, that I have no doubt. And then out of the ashes might rise a new Sphinx, Phoenix, whatever you want to call it, that would be hugely beneficial to racing if they put it together correctly. But the funding has got to be correct. And discussing on my Friday's chat, we had a few people ask questions that were around the funding issue. And I tried to approach them as I thought that they should be approached. But this article on Mike de Kock's website is really something that should be read by every single administrator in racing and looked at as to the future of funding in South African racing. I see we've got quite a few people up there already listening to this chat. And obviously, this is about being able to answer whatever questions you might have. So if you've got something, you just type it in onto the Winning Ways thing on the right. It says say something. And I'm just going to type in, hi, all of you. Hi to all. Hi to all. Ask your question. There you go. And I will now send that, and that's all that you do. So there you go. You can type in something to me, and I will try and answer the question. But racing's in very precarious times at this stage, and lots of things happening that could be the make or break of horse racing in South Africa and worldwide. Just going back to the funding model, it's quite interesting that basically what has happened in South African racing was that the owners used to own the naming rights of their horse. You used to own saddle cloths and this and that and the other, but it hasn't. It has changed quite a lot. Now I've got Cost savings and prudence are rule 101 of the business. First you bet the product and then sell it. So yes, we need funding overhaul, but we need a spending cut down as well. And Joe, you're quite right. We do need a spending cut down, and that's in the form of the way the model has been set up. This article in Mike de Kock's on his blog, on his website, was phenomenally interesting because it shows the shortfall of the model that we have at the moment, whereby all advertising revenue goes to the corporates, and certainly most of the money that the sport generates goes to the corporates as well, rather than going back into what it should go back into, is stakes, because stakes is the lifeblood of horse racing, and the only way to get people to participate is to have decent stakes. And you'll find that the racing that's the best throughout the world has the best stakes. Japan got the best stakes in the world. Hong Kong got very good stakes. The funding model in France always was fantastic, and they had a tote-only system. But I think that what's happened is that with the advent of online communications and this and that and the other, people are able to set up betting on these events without giving anything back. And that is the biggest problem that is facing racing at the moment. Joe says the article is good, but it's based on USA model with casinos funding some of the stakes. South Africa is different. Phumelela paid out 668 million in dividends. So we have a good model to create it. 668 million in dividends. That's correct. That's the point, Joe, is that the money that was generated by this industry was paid to people who did not actually generate the money. They owned shares in the corporate, which got paid the money. And it's certainly a very, very difficult situation. And Joe's put up Bookmaker Super Bets. Obviously, all these things are part of where we need to look in future when we start thinking about modeling this business to generate the most money that we can for the benefit of owners and punters. Our model did not work because 668 million went to shareholders. It did not go into the stakes pot. If it had gone into the stakes pot, that would have been different. So the model definitely did not work. It was set up differently. And in the days that I was involved in setting it up, I can tell you what happened with the industry was that the intellectual property was then handed over to the custodians of the industry, which were the new corporates that took over, which was Phumelela, basically took over the rights, naming, advertising, whatever to do with racing that could generate some income was done. And now Joe says, focus on our funding model, worked, our spending model was a joke. Well, the funding model wasn't good either. I can tell you the funding model, the goalposts have been changed. And as a result, there is no war chest for stakes. That's why we've had this huge reduction in stakes, because they paid 669 million rand in dividends to shareholders that was generated by your horses, Joe. If that kept 15% of that, instead of paying 10% and paid 8.5%, you would have found that we would have had a war chest of over 100 million rand with interest. Could have been close to 200 million rand, which certainly would have paid the stakes for more than a year in any tough financial times. That did not happen, and that is my take on what happened with the funding model, because the funding model made the shareholders in the company rich. That cannot work. You have got to make the business rich, and the business means the money that goes out from your income streams has got to come in via stakes and improvement to facilities for punters. That's my take on it. But anyway, if there's any more out there, let's chat about it. Joe, did you see about the Remington Park jackpot that the guy won? $35,000, and Remington Park refused to pay them out. I thought it was extremely interesting that you get that type of situation. When he did have the 6 winners, but the one race was a dead heat just to refresh you, and they decided to pay him the consolation. although he was the only winner, because they said that if he had had both horses in, they would have paid him, but he only had one of the horses. That makes no sense to me at all. And that's really biting the hand of the punter who you're trying to actually make into a king in this business. You're trying to give him as much information as possible that is relevant and useful for him to make informed decisions as far as his betting patterns are concerned. And there you are. Well, there you go. Joe says, small print and poor decisions, the bane of the punter's life. Well, it shouldn't have to be, I wouldn't have thought, Joe. I think that we're all trying to benefit one and all, and that's where it comes from. Anything you got on your mind today as far as racing is concerned? You've got nothing else to do except I see you eat a lot on Facebook. Gee, yeah, I mean, you can on the WhatsApp. You certainly got some food. There's no problem with that, as far as you're concerned. And I know I owe you a meal, so that's going to help you even more when you end up being able to come here. And the meal that I owe you is because I bet you that White Lightning would win before the end of December. Unfortunately, White Lightning never won before the end of December. That's why Vegas, Macau thrive, and racing is customer retention and happiness. Of course it is. Well, that's what it's all about. The customer's got to be the best kept and the best looked after. And the two customers in racing, we all make a living out of it. I've always said this. Trainers, owners, punters, jockeys, you name it, even scribes and whatever. But we make a living out of racing. That is how we derive our income. But the punters don't derive their income out of racing. And certainly the owners don't derive their income out of racing. They're the two inputs. The takers are the rest of us. And we've got to find a model that works out a lot better. It was White Lightning, Joe, and you'll never forget. I know you got the memory of an elephant because you got the biggest brain I've ever seen. So what can I say? That's what I'm going to owe you. Anyway, it doesn't seem like there's much more interest in what we're doing today. So I think that what we'll do is we'll sign off and go to next week, where we'll probably come in. You mentioned Ian Lightfoot yesterday, and tell us a story. What did you mention as far as Ian Lightfoot was concerned? I can tell you a wonderful story. Natural Force. No, it wasn't Natural Force. No. It was a horse called Northerner, Joe. What happened was Northerner had a run. The numbers will grow. Well, let's hope so. Northerner had a run at Gosforth Park, and I informed my partners in it, Graham Hawkins being one of them, that I thought that he needed the race badly. It was his first start, and he would improve quite a lot and be able to win. So anyway, we reckoned that there's only one way to get on and have a bet on the horse. And remember, we certainly liked having a bet in those days. I said to Graham, let's put on Ian Lightfoot. He rides a lot of work for me, and we can give him the ride. I know Gary Waterston was my stable rider at that stage. I think maybe him or Donovan Habib. Anyway, okay, well, good idea. Anyway, we put Ian Lightfoot on and got 4-1 for our money, which was stealing, because he really should have been 4-10. Or if he'd been from a big yard with a good rider on, with Marcus from Platinum Yard or Brett Crawford or one of them, he would have been 4-10. Anyway, it was 4-1, and Bill Ferguson and Debbie Hawkins did the commission for us, and we ended up winning very, very handsomely. But I can tell you, it wasn't without a big fright, because going through about the 400, Ian Lightfoot was sitting with a double handful and found a little trouble, which he hadn't needed to find. And he got up to win quite easily anyway, but certainly looked quite tight at the 400-meter mark. That was in the old days. That was in the 90s, and that was Ian Lightfoot. Ian Lightfoot did ride a lot of work for me, and I rewarded him quite handsomely. He was a very nice man, Ian. I really enjoyed him, and a good rider. Natural Force was a different story, and I can tell you about Natural Force. Natural Force was a first-timer. It was owned by a syndicate called Derby Syndicate, I think it was. The nominee was Jagger, Tubby Jagger, or one of the Jaggers was the nominee. And we had a couple of real nice punters in there that wanted to have a bet. But this was Natural Force, was by Mexico. He was a very, very good little horse. And I didn't believe I could get him to the race course in a maiden plate and be able to back him, because he would have been far too short. We certainly didn't like backing odds-on shots. I've never been a backer of odds-on shots, whether it be mine or anyone else's. I just let them run. So Donovan Abib was riding for me at that time. Was Gold Marks days, that sort of time. And I said to Donovan, if you tell anyone, that's the end of you and me. He will not tell anyone. Anyway, his mother asked him about how Natural Force was going on for Saturday, and it was in a juvenile plate, and Hemming had a horse that had won easily, something Tower, I think it was, or won easily first time out, and was hot odds on favorite. I told my boys to arrive at the races because we'd be interested to see how Natural Force would go, but I never told them that he could win. In the parade ring, said to them, boys, how much do you want on the horse? Each of them went around the ring, and they each put in 2,000 or 3,000 rand on the horse. And I said, we're putting another 2,000 for Donovan, and whatever else we had to do. And I said to one of the partners, Murray Jurgens, who was probably the most reliable of all of them, go and have the bet with Bill Ferguson. I told Debbie that we were going to have a bet and that she should organize the commission. Went to Bill Ferguson. Bill Ferguson laid us, I think, 6-1 for all our money. The horse was 7-1 at the time. He asked us, please, not to have a bet until the horses had cantered down if we wanted to have more on the horse. And I had a great problem trying to keep these guys in the parade ring, because immediately they'd written down what they wanted. They wanted to go and have more on, but I wanted Ferguson to have a chance to get the money on for us. Anyway, he laid us 6-1 for all the money. And needless to say, the horse cantered down and cantered back and won quite easily, beating Hemming's odds on shot. And he ended up winning the Craybark, and he won 6 races. He was plagued with unsoundness, this horse. Very, very good horse indeed. And because he had Arkalt, who I think hadn't raced at that stage, in his yard. And he said to me, what do you like? And I said, I really like this horse. I want to buy him. So he said, well, you know, we would like to buy him. How much have you got? And I said, I think I got 50,000, I think, at that time. So he said, okay, I'll let you go for 50,000. If you get him, you can have him. If he goes more than that, obviously we're going to get in the market. And we got him for 50,000. And he ended up a really, really good horse, Natural Force. Black and white colors. Some of you might remember him. But Bill was a legend, Bill Ferguson. You could get on with him. He was a proper bookmaker. And I think a lot of punters miss those days when, you know, we had people like Bill Ferguson around where you could go and have a bet. Harry Simons, Jaime Sofa, you know, there were bookmakers in those days. Down in Durban, you had Mickey Maris. In the Cape Town, the best bookmakers in Cape Town were the Pier boys, Gary and Alan. You know, the one bet on Durban racing, Cape Town racing, and the other bet on Durban and Johannesburg racing. And remember those days we had blower systems where I used to take horses down for the season down to the Cape, and got very, very friendly with Gary and Alan Pierre, and I'm extremely friendly with Gary today through Interbet. Him and Johnny Stark have been extremely good to us. Len Smart, Norman Keyser, there were many of them that made a lot of money out of bookmaking and were very good bookmakers. You know, in the early days, the bookmakers were under big pressure because chaps like Harry Simons and Jaime Sofa and those boys used to bet to Jaime Tucker and some very, very big punters, and they had the inside crack, so they really got things going. And certainly I remember one day walking onto the racetrack, and I don't know if Owen Sims is still alive, but he would not remember, but I was a very young trainer. And Owen Sims said to me, your horse in the 4th, do you think it can win? I said, yes. He said, well, make sure it doesn't. We're going to back, I think it might have been one of Kutsio's horses, Lenny or Cookie Kutsio's horse. And we don't want your horse to win. And I said, you know, I don't play like that. I want to win races. And he said, well, you know, you've got to have a way. You've got to make money, this and that and the other. And I said, listen, my horse going out trying anyway. And I thought, well, I'll probably get to the jockey and whoever I had on the horse. I'd have round among trainers, around jockeys. And the business has certainly changed a lot from then. Anyway, It's been fun chatting, and maybe we'll do this again on Friday. So don't forget to join us. I'll be posting a couple more interviews for Friday. And Joe, thanks for coming on, and always a pleasure having you and being able to chat to you. Until next time, enjoy the live stream, and we will advertise it again for Friday. I think that's a good afternoon. Have a good week, all of you in lockdown, and enjoy thinking up what you'd like to chat about on this live stream. From James Goodman, Winning Ways. Have a good one.